So in our lesson today, you're going to have more practice multiplying rational numbers, and it starts out with a question here. Stella's making the United States flag. She has blue fabric, red fabric, and white fabric. They tell you right here, choose a length for the flag. Imagine you're Stella, you're creating this flag. Decide right now how long you want your flag to be. Okay, I like to write, the flag is blank long. So whatever you decide the length of your flag to be, make your flag that long. Okay, it could be 12 feet, it could be 75 inches, it could be whatever length you want to use that as the length of your flag. Okay, based off of the length that you choose, it says, what will the length of the blue fabric Stella needs in order to make the flag? And if you look here at your picture, you see this is the blue part of the flag where the stars are. They tell you that that's 2/5 of the length of the flag. This length of the blue part is 2/5 of the entire length that you've decided. And so what I want you to do, again, pick how long you want your flag to be, and then based off of the size that you created your flag, I want to know how long should your blue part be. In the next example, we're told that two hikers descend from the summit of a mountain. And the question's asking us, what is Petra's total change in elevation? And we can look at the picture here. We can see this is Petra, and this is her hiking partner, Ben. And for Ben, they told us it's -1 2/10 meters change in elevation. So it looks like he's going down, which we know that it's from the word descend. He's going down 1 2/10 meters. That's how much he's gone down from the summit. Petra, though, it says that Petra's change in elevation is 3.5 times as great as Ben's change in elevation. So if we know Ben's change, which was -1 2/10 meters, and we know that Petra's change is 3.5 times as great, all we need to do is the following multiplication problem. We can do 3.5 times -1 2/10. And before I actually start to calculate how much this is going to be, I'm going to look right at the signs here, and I'm going to notice that my numbers have different signs. When I multiply two numbers with different signs, I know my product has to be negative. So I'm just going to get that out of the way right now. I know my answer needs to be negative. Now I need to actually do the multiplication to figure out negative what. So I'm going to rewrite this vertically. 3 5/10, 1 2/10. And I'm going to multiply. 5 times 2 is 10, carry the 1. 2 times 3 is 6, 6 add 1 is 7. I need a 0 placeholder now, and I'm going to do 1 times 5 is 5, 1 times 3 is 3. And now I'm going to add these values together. 0 and 0 is 0, 7 and 5 is 12, carry a 1, 1 and 3 is 4. And now I need to decide the placement of my decimal point. Well, this is 3 5/10, 1 2/10. Tenths times tenths is hundredths. Hundredths is 2 decimal places, so I'm going to take my number right here. I'm going to move the decimal in once, twice, and I'm going to have 4 and 20 hundredths, or technically you don't need that 0, 4 and 2/10, but remember here that your answer was negative, and so I'm going to say that the answer here is -4 and 2/10. I can show that on my number line as well. If I remember with a multiplication problem, this multiplication problem means that I need 3.5 groups of -1 and 2/10. And so I'm going to show that with my number line here. I'm going to start with just 3 groups of -1 and 2/10, and then we'll worry about the half group when we get to the end. Okay, so to have a group of -1 and 2/10, I'm going to have to move to the left. And if I look at how this number line is broken up here, from 0 to -1 is 5 lines. That means that each of these little lines must be 2/10. 2/10, 4/10, 6/10, 8/10, and then right there, 10/10, which would be 1 whole. This has to be my -1. So for my first group of -1 and 2/10, I'm going to have to go to -1, and then the next line over is going to be -1 and 2/10. Okay, and so this is my first group of -1 and 2/10. My second group of -1 and 2/10 is going to start right here at -1 and 2/10 and go to -2 and 4/10, which is 2 lines past -2. So this is my second group of -1 and 2/10. My third group is going to start at -2 and 4/10 and go to -3 and 6/10, which is again is 1, 2, 3 past -3. There's my third group of -1 and 2/10. And now I need a half a group. Well, half of -1 and 2/10 is -6/10. So I'm going to go -2, -4, -6/10 further. This is my half group, which is only -6/10. And if I look right here, I'm the first line past -4, which again, this is going to be my -4 and 2/10. And so this matches what I got when I did the multiplication problem. Now, what would this number mean? Well, since it's a negative number, I know that Petra's descending, so I'm going to write Petra descended, there we go, get the spelling right. Petra descended 4 and 2/10, and the units were meters. Petra descended 4 and 2/10 meters. In our next example, we're told that Megan's bank account is charged $9.95 per month for an online newspaper subscription. How would you represent the change in her account balance after 3 months of charge? And so what we're doing here, we're going to have 3 times, well, if we're being charged $9.95, that's going to be represented with a negative. So 3 times negative $9.95. Okay, so again, looking at this, before I do anything, I already know that my answer has to be a negative number because a positive times a negative is negative. And now I'm just going to set up the multiplication so I can figure out how much that's going to be. Remember, you don't have to line up decimal places when you multiply. 5 times 3 is 15, carry a 1. 9 times 3 is 27, add 1 is 28, carry your 2. 9 times 3 is 27, add 2 is going to be 29. And now again, we have to decide the placement of our decimal. Well, this is hundredths times whole. Hundredths times the whole value is still hundredths. So I'm going to move my decimal point in twice because that's hundredths. And so now I know my answer to this, 3 times negative $9.95 is going to be negative $29.85. Okay, and again, I can show that on my number line here. 3 months of a charge of $9.95, I'm going to be moving to the left. And it's not quite going to be $10 each time, so I'm going to go just a little shy of the $10. There's my first charge of $9.95. My second charge, again, is going to be just shy of the $20, so I'll get my second charge of $9.95. Okay, and then again, my third charge this time, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Each one of these have to be 10 cents. I already know my answer here is negative $29.85. So that's $30, $29.90, $29.80. Halfway in between, right there, this is going to be my third charge of $9.95. Okay, now it says right here, convince me. Megan's bank account was charged 3 times. If I didn't do the calculation, how could we determine whether this should be a negative or a positive change to her account? Well, we know that it's happening for 3 months. 3 months is represented. 3 months is represented by a positive 3. Okay. Charging $9.95 is represented, we said, is represented by negative 9 9/95. And so what we have here, we have a positive number, and we're going to multiply that by a negative number. A positive number times a negative number is a negative number. So the change will be negative. The change will be negative. In my next example, they want me to find the product of negative 3/10 and negative 11/30. And the first thing that I want to point out here is that you have a decimal and a fraction. And if you're going to multiply these together, you can't leave them as one of each. What you're going to want to do is try to convert either the decimal into the fraction or this fraction into a decimal. And think to yourselves, which is going to be easier to do? Well, I think it's going to be a lot easier to change this decimal into a fraction, and so that's what I'm going to do. Again, if you know how to say it, you know how to write it. I know this is called negative 3/10, and so that's what I'm going to write, negative 3/10. I need the product, so I'm going to multiply that by negative 11/30. Okay, and so this is my multiplication problem, and before I multiply, I'm going to look and see if I can simplify. Remember, you can simplify if a numerator and a denominator have a common factor. And I see this numerator 3, this denominator 30 have a common factor of 3. 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 30 10 times. The 11 and the 10 don't have any common factors besides 1, so now we're ready to multiply. For my numerators, 1 times 11 is 11. My denominators, 10 times 10 is 100. And I need to now look at the signs. This was a negative, this was a negative. If you multiply two numbers with the same sign, your answer is going to be positive. So in this case, we get an answer of 11 hundredths. Okay, so we're going to practice multiplying rational numbers underneath in A through D. Here you've got a couple of decimals to multiply. Here you've got a fraction and a mixed number. Remember what you should do with this mixed number before you do the multiplication. 2 more decimals to multiply, and then again here you've got one of each. So decide, would you rather change this number into a fraction or this number into a decimal?